The reason for recording this is we will make it publicly available online, just to benefit those that weren't able to join us today. Before I hand you over to Matthew, I think it's important to note that we've been working collaboratively with college colleagues since March 2020 to create and implement adaptations to assessment and quality assurance for both session 1920, which in fairness seems like a very long time ago, and now also for session 2021. The work has been continuous, meetings have been weekly, if not more frequently, since that time. When planning for this session back in June last year, I think it's fair to say we were in a rather different place in terms of the pandemic than we found ourselves towards the end of last year, or even into this year. It's really difficult at the moment to predict what the rest of the session and beyond might look like from a college and student perspective. However, we are committed to continue to work really closely with you to provide support and guidance in assessment and quality assurance. So I will get on with proceedings, because I know that there's a lot to get through and a lot of questions that will be asked under the Q&A. So I'm now going to hand you over to Matthew McCullough, who's going to take us through the decision tree for 2021, which really sits at the centre of the latest guidance published last week. So Matthew, over to you.
Thanks, Denise, very much. Afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all. So as Denise says, I'm just going to start with a reasonably short overview of the decision tree that we're using in this session. I'm then going to hand over to Leslie Joyce, who's then going to give us an update on the subject-specific guidance and where we're up to at the moment. After that, I'll come back to you and talk to you a little bit more about IQA panels, particularly about roles and responsibilities of IQA panels. And then I'll hand over to Juliet, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about the external quality assurance side this year. And then for the majority, certainly the last half of the session, we'll open up for questions and answers from yourselves, and we'll try very hard to answer those as fully as possible and in sequence as they were asked as well. So to help us with that, if, as Denise says, if you could put any questions you have in the chat box, that will be very helpful, and then we'll try and pick those up, and either we'll assist each other in trying to answer those as we go, or else we'll park the question and pick that up as part of the Q&A session towards the end. So please don't be shy in asking questions. Like we always say, the only silly question is the one that you don't ask, because the chances are if you're thinking of asking a question, 3 or 4 people would love to hear the answer to that question as well. So please don't be shy. This session is very much for your benefit. So we're trying to pick out some of the important bits to start off with, but we can't second guess every question you have. So please feel free to put the questions in the chat box, and we'll do what we can to answer. If we completely run out of time within the hour, because we will finish this up at 3 o'clock, so if we completely run out of time to answer questions, we will try as well as possible to provide written answers to some of those key questions afterwards. But fingers crossed, we'll keep it reasonably tight and get through the questions as we go. And by all means, use the icons as well to agree with questions other people are asking. So again, rather than asking the same question 6 or 7 times, if somebody's asked a good question, just pop a thumbs up next to them or something like that, and then we'll see that it's a question that several people are wanting to ask. So as I said, we'll start just with a little overview of the decision tree. Hopefully you have seen the guidance document that's been produced, and again, to repeat what Denise says, this has been co-created with colleagues in the college sector, and we are extremely grateful for the advice and guidance and counsel that they've given us as we've gone through this process. And therefore, the important thing, I think, is that because it's been co-created with colleagues in the college sector, is that it should be written in a language and a style you understand that are comfortable with. But if there are bits that we need to pick out and expand or explain, then we will do. I don't think it's going to be particularly helpful for me to read through the guidance word by word. You can do that at your leisure, and you've probably had a chance to do that beforehand. So probably what's important at this stage is just to pick out a few of the key messages which I think are important for IQA panel members to understand, and importantly for these messages to be cascaded down into course teams through course team leaders or through faculty heads or whatever. So it's really sort of some of the key points that are writ through the guidance, if you like, but are not necessarily explicitly called out in particular bullet points. So the one of the main things that we are very keen, as one of the first messages to go out to course teams, particularly course teams who were dealing with the decision last year, the decision tree last year, is that it is a similar approach with the decision this year, the decision tree, but it is not the same decision tree as last year. And that's very important. When we talked about this with colleagues, and we talked at length about this, we wanted to keep the feel of the decision tree similar to last year, so that when course teams looked at it, they would feel comfortable, they'd feel reassured that it's broadly the same sort of process as they were following last year. But there are some key differences in there. So one of the things I would ask, certainly in terms of the roles and responses in an IQA panel, is that you do everything possible to completely obliterate all last year's guidance within your centre, because we really don't want course teams or individual lecturers or assessors getting confused about whether it's the right decision tree or the wrong decision tree. So, at sort of a network level, but also at individual computer level, if you can encourage people to make sure that all last year's guidance is obliterated, and then we know with confidence that we're following the right guidance through this year. So as with the decision tree from last year, start at the top left. That's where the entry point, if you like, to the decision tree is. It's always slightly confused with it being a decision tree, is whether you go down the decision tree or up the decision tree or whatever. So anyway, start top left and work from there is a simple advice. Where at all possible, adopt an assessment approach which is towards the top of the decision tree. And what we mean by that is certainly at the top, the first question is it possible for traditional unit by unit assessment to take place in line with unit specification? Now, okay, that's probably going to be a fairly rare beast this year, but it will be possible for some group awards for you, for individual colleges to follow a unit by unit approach. So if that is at all possible, that is the process to follow. So we are very much asking IQA panels to help course teams understand, stay at the top of the decision tree if you possibly can. That's the safest place to be. It's tried and tested because it's an approach you've been using up until now. You have valid assessments set up. You have assessments that the course teams are comfortable with, and you have internal verification structures and processes set up to support that. So if at all possible, generate all your evidence at the unit by unit level. If it's not possible for the whole course, still generate what you can at the unit by unit approach, because even if you have to go further down the decision tree, it will give you very good evidence to base your future decisions on. So again, it's for course teams where possible, unit by unit traditional approach with an internal verifier working with an assessor is the best route possible. Now, we published also in September, at the beginning of this session, some guidance on how you can adapt assessments to gather evidence. And typically the one that we always use there is where we've removed the need for an assessment to be a closed book and allowed that to be conducted in sort of open book circumstances. But that's one simple example of where we have allowed adaptation of assessments. So that initial work got published in September, and that's really where you move to if you can't follow the normal traditional unit by unit. So if you can't follow normal unit by unit, the next question in the box underneath says, is it possible to assess on a traditional unit by unit basis using permitted adaptations? So you'd need to go to that September guidance and see what the permitted adaptations were within that group award. Now, one thing that's very important, again, to stress to course teams is that guidance is at the moment continually being updated. So again, it's not a case of, yeah, I read that in September, it didn't really tell me very much about my group award. Encourage course teams, course team leaders, lecturers to go back to that guidance and see if there's been an update. Leslie will talk about this more in a second, but we have had a lot of good information through from centres as to how they are adapting assessment to allow them to carry on a unit by unit basis. So good to recheck that and see whether we've managed to update the adaptation guidance. But if you even can't do that because the assessment is practical in nature or whatever, then the next question you have to ask yourselves is the qualification subject to regulation or professional body requirements or restrictions? If so, then you really don't have much choice other than to postpone the assessment. Because if there's no way of approaching this by unit approach, but there are regulatory or professional body requirements and restrictions on place, there really is nowhere to go. So that's why you've got the exit box on the right that says postpone assessment. But if the qualification that the group award is not subject to regulation or to professional body requirements and restrictions, then you are able to start taking a much more sort of broad-based assessment decisions based hopefully on course aims. But we know from last year, when we adopted the course aims approach last year, that some group awards have better course aims than others. So it's possible that a lot of our courses, when the qualification managers are looking at them, they've said, no, the course aims are good, they're very clear, and if you provide evidence of candidates meeting each of those course aims, that's sufficient for you to award pass at group award level, and obviously the contributing units. But it is possible that, as you know already, that with certain of the group awards, the course aims aren't quite robust enough. Therefore, in some of these areas, and I'll leave this to Leslie to explain, but we are putting some critical competencies in there to assist the course aims to make sure that there are ways that course teams can take a broad assessment decision based on the group award and look for candidate evidence that meets those group award requirements. So that's a mixture of course aims and critical competencies. And then from there, you can decide the assessment outcome at a group award level, and obviously that would then relate to the units which make up that group award as well. So that's a very quick look through. There's a lot of stuff to cover today, so that was really just the flavour. Start top left, stay as high as possible. If you're using the top two boxes, which is unit by unit, either normal or adapted, then you can use internal verifiers working with assessors. If you come down to the bottom area, which is making more that broad assessment judgment against course aims and course competencies, and critical competencies rather, then you would have to have an IQA panel overseeing the work of the course team, because that will be a course team decision that was being made. So I hope that helps. If there's more information you'd like, then now's the time to pop that question into the chat box, and we'll either pick it up as you go along, or else we'll begin to answer those as we go through the Q&A. So there's lots of information available in the guidance that goes into a bit more detail than I've given there, and also gives you some scenarios which I hope are useful as well. So as I say, quick whistle stop tour, but I'll hand over to Leslie now, who's going to give you an update on these subject-specific guidance. So Leslie, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks very much, Matthew, and good afternoon, everyone. So Matthew's mentioned my name a couple of times here, so hopefully I'll remember to cover all the things that Matthew thought I was going to cover. So following the operational guidance has been issued to college as to how colleges are going to about and to helping to understand this model a bit more clearly with the decision tree and FAQs on the 4th of February. So the part you'll be interested in here is to hear a bit about the consultation which SQA undertook, asking centres to let SQA know which areas of assessment, which awards were proving us challenging to assess, what these assessment challenges are within particular awards, and how centres would propose to resolve these challenges, or how centres were already resolving these assessment-related issues. So the consultation actually attracted around about 1,000 pieces of feedback. So that's 1,000 lines of feedback for a very wide range of awards, for which thank you if any of you were involved in that today. Feedback was quite varied. A lot of it provided confirmation of what SQA qualification teams were already aware of by way of assessment-related challenges. So that's helpful because we're all thinking along the same lines. So that was helpful feedback. Some other feedback provided information on solutions that college staff have devised to overcome assessment-related obstacles. And we thought some of that was really creative, and we may add some of those examples into subject guidance anonymously to share these good ideas that some centres are finding successful and SQA find entirely acceptable. So that was really helpful feedback as well. So all of the feedback is under consideration by SQA's qualifications teams just now, who are all working as quickly as they can to decide how best to respond to what they knew already and what the guidance, the feedback and the survey is telling us as well. Got a lot of awards to work through, 800 awards to work through. But we've already, qualifications managers have already made decisions for around about 50 awards, and there's a spreadsheet available on SQA's website. Some of you will hopefully know this already, providing information on subject guidance and critical competence for around 50 awards. And information has been added to this on a daily basis to cover more and more awards. So Matthew mentioned critical competencies. So critical competencies will only be published for awards where the published aims of an award don't cover all the critical aspects of the overall award. So, for example, where an outcome may be covering critical knowledge, skills or understanding in a unit may be missed when centres are assessing to the overall aims of an award. We're not expecting to have to do an awful lot, create critical competencies, that's for an awful lot of awards, but that's the process we're working through at the moment, looking at the aims, the overall aims, looking at the outcomes in each of the mandatory units and making sure that the aims are robust enough for that to be covered and to give everyone confidence that assessing to just the aims of the award will generate the right level of assessment and decisions in centres. So a lot of work taking place and 50 awards covered already, and we'll be speeding up with that because we now have all the process internally. All of our qualification teams are on, they're on song now, they know what's being asked, got the editing team and the web team all lined up. So the information will appear on the website regularly on a daily basis. At the same time, we're now producing work's taking place to produce a publication schedule, and it will provide dates by which the information about subject guidance and critical competencies will be available for all of the national vocational awards. So that's around 800 awards. And we're aiming to publish the information for the majority of these awards by the end of February. When we have that publication schedule populated, at least will the majority of 800 qualifications populated with the dates by which the guidance or critical competencies, if they are going to be created or not, that will be in place hopefully by early next week on the website. So any college will be able to look at this particular spreadsheet, just check in the code of any of the 800 awards and find out when the information is going to be available, or if in fact it already is available for these awards in relation to subject guidance and critical competencies. So at least you will know, your teams will know within your colleges, for some of the awards, the 50 so far, and that will be increasing as time goes on. But that publication schedule next week will allow you to look at that, and you'll know the date by which the full guidance for all of the awards will be available. So that's really it. All I was going to say, one more piece I suppose is to say that we're also planning to send out a copy of the template for critical competencies with an example which will be matched into a national framework sometime next week. And so that's really to allow college staff to see what SQA has done by way of creating critical competence for an award, and so that colleges then can start on this task for the locally devised awards. So we're working apace as quickly as we can. We would all like it to be today, but certainly progressing the work as quickly as we possibly can. There are a number of these decisions, a lot of these decisions for the large awards, high uptake awards, awards with some tricky assessments or assessments that are tricky under current circumstances. They need to go to qualification support teams for approval, these kind of discussions and decisions, and that takes time as well. And a lot of the qualification support team and members are coming from colleges, so we need to arrange meetings or be emailing back and forth there. So there's quite a lot of communication taking place in order to try to hasten on the decisions and get the information published and guidance published as quickly as possible. So that was really the high level summary that I was intending to provide here. Happy to take any questions, but that's the summary. Hopefully it's understandable to you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie, very much. I'll pick back up. Jill, could I ask we just park questions till the beginning of the Q&A session, if that's okay? You'll be the first one we come to, I promise you. So you're top of the list when it comes to questions in the Q&A session, but if we can just hang fire for that, that would be great. Good. Okay, thanks, Leslie, very much. That's a good update. So we're just moving on now to an overview of IQA panels. So let me just start by saying the feedback we got from lots of different sources on IQA panels last year was extremely positive. So we'd very much like to continue building on the success of the IQA panels last year. Feedback we got was very much using words like supportive, informative, helpful, constructive. I generally did not hear any negative feedback on IQA panels, and certainly nothing critical of them at all. So we're very much trying to build on the success of IQA panels last year. So let me try and pick out a couple of things that we wanted to sort of advise this year. The broad work of the IQA panel is to do four things. It's to support, to advise, moderate, and to confirm. Now you can see those almost in sequence, if you like. You start off by supporting and advising. That's very much a comms exercise to start off with. It's very much about talking to course teams, to course team leaders, cascading information down through faculties to make sure that people understand early doors what the SQA guidance is, and importantly, what that guidance looks like in the context of your own college. We know certainly, and it's great to hear this, that a lot of you are hanging back on publishing guidance internally because you want to contextualize that guidance into how it fits into your college. That's quite right. So it should be very much a sort of an individual guidance per college, but you are free to use whatever parts of our own guidance you want in that process. But that first part is very much about supporting, informing, and advising course teams on how to go through that process. And that includes the development of templates in relation to locally devised clusters. There's a few questions about the locally devised clusters. Quite right, you should ask those questions, but very much we're talking about the role of the IQA panel to work early doors with course teams to support them in the development of those templates. The moderating comes in place very much when course teams are starting to go through the process of making those assessment judgments at whatever point in the decision tree. I would like to think that there might be some sort of activity in terms of observation by IQA panels of these course team meetings as they're going on. Obviously, it's a resource issue. Some centres I know last year had multiple IQA panels. Some centres went with one IQA panel, but I would like to think on a risk-based proportionate level that there would be some observation of the course team discussion by members of the IQA panel. But again, in a supportive and advisory type capacity. And then the last work is after the course teams have gone through that work, is then to interact with the course teams to confirm that the work that they've done is in line with SQA advice and guidance. So if we put that into sort of a very simple terms, pre-delivering and post, I think they're very clearly expressed on the part where in the internal quality assurance guidance we published that it says the responsibilities of the IQA panel. And it says there are three, and I think they are well summed up. The first, which is more that sort of pre-course team work, is to advise course teams on the implementation of SQA guidance on assessment. As I say, it's that comms, it's that cascade, it's that working with course teams to make sure they fully understand the guidance that we published. Then once the course teams begin to undertake that work, the second part is the during part, if you like, is to monitor the work of course teams to ensure implementation of SQA guidance on assessment. And then once the course teams have gone through that work, they would then be probably meeting with IQA panel members, and the panel's role there is to ensure that SQA guidance on assessment has been implemented before those results are then submitted to SQA. You would look to have some sort of confirmation process with IQA panels working with course teams to confirm that that's all okay before those results are then submitted to SQA. Now, the only other bit of advice that I just want to talk to you briefly is about the requirement, and Juliet will touch on a bit of this in a second as well, that IQA panel arrangements obviously will be specific to your situation, but whatever you do, there are four things that we're looking for. We're looking for the work of the IQA panel to be documented. That kind of explains itself, but we're looking about your overall approach as to how you are, constructing IQA panels, how those IQA panels are breaking down their work into pre, during, post, how they're interacting with course teams, etc. So it's almost a sort of not quite a strategic document, but probably more a tactical document, explaining how you'll be working with course teams to ensure that guidance is understood and followed. The second bit is the interesting one, risk-based and proportionate. And somebody was asking the other day what we meant by risk-based and proportionate. Well, flippantly, part of that lies with you, because you know more about the local risks and what's proportionate than we do. But let me give you a few pointers on that. Certainly, if a course team is making decisions lower down that decision tree, then we've already said that IQA panels should be involved and should be looking to support and moderate and then confirm. You may have an eye on, for example, graded unit outcomes, and you may find that as opposed to your normal spread of A's, B's and C's, you see quite a shift towards a lot more A's and possibly B's and a lot fewer C's than last year. Now, that doesn't say there's a problem within the course team, but it might be something you want to engage with the course team and ask them to explain why there seemed to be a pattern of an increased number of A's. Now, Sam, that's not a guilty until proven innocent. It's far the opposite, but there is something there that would cause a professional discussion with the IQA panel and the course team, so the course team can explain why there is a shift in outcomes, for example, in graded units. On the other end of the scale, you may have course teams who worked with course aims last year. Those course aims are still the same this year, and they worked very well, and the IQA panel confirmed their work last year. It may be, therefore, the IQA panel can spend a smaller amount of time and do less sampling with a course team where they are doing very much the same work as they did last year, and where they evidenced last year that they were doing that work very effectively. So I'm not going to be entirely prescriptive about what is risk-based, but I would ask the IQA panels to do that work, to sit and think about what would be the areas that would indicate that you would want to spend more time working with a course team, and very much more time at the front end in that supportive advisory capacity, as well as in that confirmation role at the end. And please don't think we're asking you to end load all this, because we know ourselves that the best type of QA is the upfront QA. The more you can do upfront to help people do the job better, the more likely the job is to go well when you come to it. So front load QA where you can, but in that kind of risk-based and proportionate manner. Promoting a standardized and consistent approach across all key course teams, well, that's very much what the IQA panels will do as they go through. So really, just to emphasize, it's that pre, during, post approach to IQA panels we're looking for. We're looking for them to really work with course teams in that communication area and that guidance and advice area up front, to enable the course teams to do that job well when they come to discussion within the course teams. For some of those course team discussions to be monitored by IQA panels, probably on a risk-based proportionate process, but also that confirmation process as well to be risk-based and proportionate. So I hope that's helping you. The main thing is to go back to the original point I said, which is the IQA panels worked very well last year. So we're looking to build on that success, and that's very much why the advice this year is very similar in shape and style and tone, I think, to last year's advice about IQA panels. So again, I hope that's been helpful. Please feel free to ask questions as we go. But what I'm going to do now is hand over to Juliet, and Juliet's going to talk to you a little bit more about what our requirements are of evidence of IQA panels, but also in terms of qualification verification as well. So Juliet, I'll hand over to you now.
Hello everyone, how are you all doing? Okay, Matthew's went over the IQA panels. Oh, I should introduce myself actually. My name is Juliet McGinley. I'm a Senior Ops Manager. I just realised it's not my usual quality managers that are only on the call, so that's my role within SQA. I have responsibility for the deployment of qualification verification activities, so we've been working through with Denise and Matthew and many others the quality assurance model for this session. I just wanted to touch on some of the information that Matthew has talked about, the roles and responsibilities of the IQA panels, and I just want to give you some details as to when we'd be looking at for information to be submitted to us, and give you an option of a platform as to how to get that into us. So first of all, we're looking for the information you record through your IQA panels to be submitted to us by the 31st of March. That's our kind of deadline time for that. Obviously, if you can't make that date, we'll have conversations about that, but we would ask that you engage with us. We've For those of you who don't know about the Centre Hub, we've created a SQA Centre Hub, which is a platform that allows evidence upload for qualification verification and systems verification activity. So we have adapted that also and put in a new form within the college sector to allow you to submit that documentation through the SQA Centre Hub. However, if you're not using the Centre Hub and they're using your own platform, then you can email it into us. However, I would prefer it all come in through the SQA Centre Hub, as that means that we have a record of it, because then I'll have to upload it. So we're asking for that by the 31st of March. We're also asking for a complete list of the qualifications where IQA panels were used to assess candidate evidence by the 30th of June 2021. So we're hoping for a whole list of all the information for everything that's gone through IQA panel by the 30th of June 2021. So you've got 31st of March to submit your documentation, and then the 30th of June to submit the list of qualifications that have gone through that. So I'm not going to say any more about the IQA panels. What I'm going to touch on now is external verification activity. So we have worked through a list of qualifications that we would like to verify this session, or we will be verifying this session, and we have already released out our regulated qualification verification selections, and we will be releasing out our foundation apprenticeship ones within the next couple of weeks. So they'll be rolled out and they should be going ahead as normal. They'll all be taking place in the virtual platform, and that should reduce the burden within centres. You have the Centre Hub to upload evidence, but we've previously stated that you don't need to use the Centre Hub if you have your own platform that you've used previously. And I know a couple of centres had already gone down the road of creating their own digital platforms before we got involved. With regards to our self-regulated qualifications, we have a list of qualifications that we are going to verify this session, and I can rhyme them off for you right now. We have, don't worry, this will be sent out to you also, but sport and recreation, drama and theatre arts, hospitality and professional cookery, dental nursing, vet nursing, childhood practice, leadership management and children's reporter, sciences and British Sign Languages. Now, these are the areas that we are going to do group award verification activity in, and a lot of them have been selected because they have a regulatory part on them or because we have areas of high risk. So I just want to explain what group award verification is. We've gone huge amount of effort this year to build this new model of group award verification. Our regulated qualifications have been released out to our EBs, and our EBs are contacting you regarding the visit planning process. That's our normal process for qualification verification activity. The only slight difference will be that the virtual platform will be where the actual activity takes place. And as I said, if the evidence is submitted well in advance, then the virtual burden on your centre should be minimal. It shouldn't be full days of activity because the evidence would have been reviewed previously. With self-regulated qualifications, we're not going to deploy them out to EVs initially. Alistair, Morton and myself are working our way through the selections of the qualifications we've just discussed, and my team will be contacting each of the colleges individually to discuss through the planning process. So the planning activities will not be released out to multiple EVs. It will be released out to our team, who will then engage with the EVs offline. Now, the beauty of group award verification is that I can pull multiple EVs into one activity. You will have one QA logistics officer contacting you to go through the planning process. You will have one event where multiple EVs will be in attendance, and you will get one group award report out of that. So the burden that we're taking off you is that we won't have multiple EVs contacting you, we won't have multiple EVs setting up multiple events, and then multiple reports coming your way. So I'm hoping the use of multiple being reduced is something that you'll be pleased to hear. So those activities we hope to start rolling out around about March, and start engaging with each of the centres individually to work through the selections that we have in place for our self-regulated qualifications. So I don't think there's anything else other than further qualification verification activity. That's the ones that we've determined, that's the ones that we've agreed that we will go ahead and verify. However, I have to point out also that further selections by QB could be made through the session if there's any intelligence or data source, SQA's data source, that tells us that we have to pick up for verification activity. So although this is what we're determining up front, that doesn't mean that we can't pick up and select at a further date. And all evidence must be held until the end of the year, so December 2021. So please ensure that all candidate evidence and IV documentation is held till December 2021, which will allow SQA to pick up for selections of QB activity if required. So I'm going to hand back over to Denise. I think that's everything covered. If there's any questions, please drop them in the message box and I'll pick them up, and Denise will pick them up after me. Denise,
Great.
over to you.
Thanks for that, Juliet. And just to reiterate, we will have a communication coming out which runs through all of the detail that Juliet's just covered there. So if you were scrambling to write down various subject areas, etc., don't worry, that will come out this week. We're just finalising that communication. Okay, so there has been lots of questions coming up. Not all of them have managed to answer just yet, and there was a couple of hands up. So firstly, I'm going to go to Jill and then to John. So Jill.
Thanks, Denise, and sorry for jumping in. You know, it's just typical of me. Obviously,
okay.
no active listening when we were told to wait to the end, so I do apologise. This might be a silly question, but you did say there's no silly questions. So if we had, say, for example, a programme that had 15 credits for a first year HNC, and there's no critical competence requirements, but we were going with the bottom of the decision tree, would the expectation be that we complete the alternative assessment template for the HNC and then a separate one for the cluster?
For the additional 3 units?
And maybe more. There might be 3 units, but we might have, depends. Well, no,
yep.
3 units, yeah, 3.
When we refer to HNC, we are certainly talking about HNC in the way that we would certificate that, but understanding that colleges have differing models where you may have additional 3 units or more sitting out with that. But yep, Jill, you're absolutely right. We would be looking at the group award in terms of the framework as we would certificate that, and anything over and above that would need to be considered, separately.
And I think that was clear in our meetings, that if you were sending something out for, say, HNC childhood practice, that was clear. I just wasn't absolutely clear if there was no critical competence requirements, you know, and we're doing it ourselves, if you like, if it went to the bottom of the tree, which I'm hoping they don't, that we would have both. That's fine. That's clear. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Jill. John Redman. Hi, John.
Hi, Denise, and thanks for that. Yeah, I've got a question or actually a few questions regarding the decision tree. You know, and I was listening very carefully to what Matthew was saying, and I think I wouldn't disagree, if you like, in terms of the principles of the decision tree, in terms of supporting colleagues and so on. But it was more just in terms of I suppose how. Or to reconcile, if like, an apparent difference of perception, that Matthew's kind of so explanation of the IQA panels, if you like, was ones of being kind of supportive, advisory, having a role in kind of so more specific role in terms of maybe confirming sort of decisions taken and so on. When I look at the decision tree, however, my inference or interpretation of that would suggest that IQA panels are, if you like, tend to be used in a much more kind of restrictive way. They come in, if you like, at both the bottom end of the decision sort of tree, and are used under, therefore, or expected under quite specific circumstances. Therefore, the inference being that you wouldn't expect to see the role of IQA panels, if you like, in the first sort of 2 rows, if you like, of the decision tree, if I can describe it in that way. They would only really come in the kind of as in the sort of 3rd sort of section of the decision tree. Is that inference a kind of correct one? Is really my question.
Thanks, John. Matthew, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, John. That's a good question, and I'll try and answer it as specifically as possible, but in a very vague way. So the first work of the IQA panel, which is to communicate and make sure that course teams understand the process of using the decision tree, has to go across all course teams. because they won't know whether they're on branch 1, 2, 3 or 4 until somebody's helped them understand that. Now, where I'm going to be vague is that you don't necessarily need to call that an IQA panel. You could have anybody who is responsible for communicating understanding of the decision tree and the guidance so that course teams fully understand it. But you're right, in terms of that monitoring and confirmation process, that would only really kick in for course teams who are using the bottom branch of the decision tree. So if you communicated out to all your course teams and said, right, guys, you need to understand what the decision tree is and how we're going to use it. And they said, listen, John, that was fantastic. We understand completely on the decision tree. And all of our course teams are either working on branch 1 or branch 2. In other words, we're taking a unit by unit. And yes, that could be a combined assessment approach, as somebody pointed out, but you are assessing unit by unit, either on the sort of traditional approaches or with the allowed changes to assessment. Then the IQA panel would stand down at that point, John. They would only carry on their work if they're working with course teams who are saying, no, we will have some collegiate decisions to make within a course team. And the point being is that if you are having a number of lecturers getting together as a course team to make judgments on individual candidates as a course team, then the normal process of having an internal verifier working with an assessor doesn't work, because all the people in the course team will be a mixture of assessors and IVs. So in effect, they would be IVing their own work. So that's why we look for the IQA panel, who is slightly independent, not necessarily technical specialist in that course team, but there is an element of independence from outside in. So the IQA panel can say, no, we understand the work you've gone through, we understand the evidence you've used, and we understand the decisions you've made. We are happy to stand by those decisions. But that's showing a little bit of independence, which the IV normally has, but the IV probably can't this year because they are part of the course team. So I hope that makes sense. But anyway, there's the work of the IQA panel or somebody to spread the word to start off with. But then the IQA sort of meat and bones work comes in for those course teams who are working at stage 4 of the decision. Does that answer your question, John, or does that just confuse you more? Sorry,
No, actually, no, it was, I can see the difficulties here. I think for me, in terms of applying it, and I suspect at the colleges, it may well be that part of our first task is to try and identify amongst the kind of course teams exactly at what stage they are in the decision tree. And thereafter, then be a little bit more prescriptive about the kind of the approach or applying the IQA part, if you like, of that process in a more kind of specific or focused way. But assisting course teams with identifying where they're placed or where the specific courses are placed with regard to that decision tree. So thanks for that, Matthew.
With a slightly challenging eye as well, John, to say if somebody sort of says we're going to go down to level 4 in the decision tree, not to sort of say, okay, that's fine, we'll work with it, is to challenge them, is to absolutely be sure they do need to go down to the level 4, because just to reiterate, we would want course teams staying as high on that decision tree as possible. So part of the IQA panel is just, yes, exactly. But so part of the IQA panel is just to check that there is a real need to move down to the level 4 on that decision.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew.
Okay, thank you both for that. Lisa Dinnan. Hi, Lisa.
Oh, thanks, Denise. Yeah, I would like to implement a local system where we have a 2-stage approach, so that stage 1 essentially is the unit by unit approach or the combined assessment approach, which we already have in place and we're able to apply for pre-verification services for. So that would be stage 1, and then align. And then the second stage would be those who would like to seek guidance from the IQA panel to move in to the bottom end of the decision tree. So at which point then they seek guidance from the IQA panel. So the first 2 options effectively are following the SQA guidance as it is, and the IQA panel would come into place should they have to take one of the slightly less prescribed approaches to quality assurance. Obviously, we don't have multiple campuses, we have a single campus. So in some ways that helps control what we do. We've got a small quality unit, but actually everything could come through us through those 2 stages. And then I think it would be easier to manage. And as Matthew says, at that point last year, what we did was we set up teams. So every team that approached us to move into the 2nd stage, we then created a section on teams with the course team members, the IVs, quality assurance staff, and then we could work on it collaboratively to work through those various stages that Matthew just described, and then have a review at the end, and it provided us with an automatic audit trail of who attended the meetings, when they were, actions to be followed, and that kind of thing. So I felt that a similar approach would work quite effectively and still align with the new guidance.
Yep, Lisa, what you described sounds very sensible, but I'll let Matthew come back in.
Lisa, in essence, knock yourself out, girl. That sounds like a great approach. It really does. But again, that's the part of the beauty of this, is that there are several different ways that different colleges can construct their approach. You might have gateways that you go through. You might approach this in an IV1, IV2, IV3 type process. There could be a number of different things, but certainly what you're describing sounds perfectly sensible. But I don't want other colleges thinking, well, that's the way we have to go. But it might be worth a few of you having a chat with each other, and I'm sure you probably are, just about what you've done last year or what works well or whatever. But what you're describing there sounds extremely well thought out, and I think extremely proportionate. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think we're conscious. We're trying not to be too prescriptive here as to how colleges should be carrying this out. We want you to do the best and the right thing for your own course teams and your own college, but just working within some high-level criteria, which Matthew outlined. So I'm going to come. Thank you for that, Lisa. I'm going to come to Jackie McCormick.
Hi, Matthew. I just wanted to confirm, so for the IQA panels, my thoughts would be that where it's a holistic approach, we would involve the IQA panels there. But even at that point, we were saying that they're signing off to say, yeah, we agree that the holistic approach can be applied. That at that stage could still be a risk-based model. So it could be those ones where it's borderline or the course teams are unsure. Or are you saying that where it's a holistic approach, it must be signed off by the IQA panel at the outset before the course implement it?
Slightly cryptic, Jackie. What I am trying to convey in that is that you should have confidence that if a course team is going into the 4th branch of the decision tree, that their actions merit it, if that makes sense. Now, that might be quite a relaxed conversation between a member of the IQA panel and a course team leader, and a simple note made. It might be, a deeper process than that. You might adopt a risk-based approach and say, no, we understand you that is a decision which I'm trying to think of what the situations are where you would let a course team just automatically go to that without some sort of sign off from IQA panel. I think you probably want some interaction between the IQA panel and a course team who wanted to go to the level 4, but that doesn't need to be an overly bureaucratic process, I don't think. So it's trying to find the key reasons why a course team is proposing it has to move to the branch 4, and then a quick way of that evidence being approved, if you like, all those reasons being approved by the IQA panel to then kick that process off. So again, it's that balance between not being too prescriptive, but being, giving you guidance. You need to be confident that if course teams working at stage 4 in the decision tree, that they have good reason to be working in that level, and then you need to engage with them through that process.
Jackie, is that helpful?
Yes and no. I think I'm still hearing that there has to be some sort of formal sign-off by the IQA panels for every decision that's sitting at that holistic approach. At this moment in time, I don't know what it's going to look like until we obviously get the critical competencies and stuff, and we start mapping it out. And obviously, depending on when we get back on campus, there's obviously a huge amount of factors that are going to come into play on where we end up sitting on that decision tree that we don't know at this moment. But I'm just trying to think about, the complexities of doing that and having those IQA panels set up and involved in signing off that initial decision. But we'll think about that internally. It might well be that we'll just use curriculum heads for that, but then we'll use as a sign-off, but then we'll use the IQA panels for the decision. I just want to be clear, because obviously if we have to submit our guidance by the end of March, what I don't want to do is create something that then comes into yourselves and you say, no, the IQA panels absolutely have to sign off in all of these approaches.
So Jackie, that sort of tiered approach you described there, I think is a very good solution. If you delegate that decision down to the faculty heads or whatever, that is a reasonable thing to do. We certainly don't want to make this overly bureaucratic. If I'm absolutely honest with you, one of our worries is that somebody is making a corporate decision, and I'm not saying we think it's actually happening, but we don't want somebody deciding at a corporate decision or even at a course team level, we are just going to go down to level 4 because it's the easiest thing for us to do or whatever. You know, it's just we want something in the colleges to help reassure yourselves and ourselves that there's not just a mass migration to level 4, but you could absolutely put a tier in through the faculty heads, and again they'll probably sit close enough to their course teams, they'd be able to take a view as to whether that was a reasonable thing to do or not. So again, I think that as a model is an extremely sensible, pragmatic way of doing it, and one that we would support absolutely.
Right, that's fine. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you both for that. And I would just highlight, I had said previously today at our focus group meeting that the sooner you can get documentation in that outlines your planned approach to IQA, the better, because if there is any work done, we can very quickly step up to help support you with that. So more than happy to see those coming in as soon as possible. Okay, I am going to move on. Rob McDermott. Hi, Rob.
Hi. Thanks very much. It's kind of just an extension on some of these conversations. When it comes to a graded unit, some of my teams are already thinking that they will not be going down the holistic approach with the kind of unit by unit delivery, but they felt that some of the guidance that was coming out in terms of competences, in terms of aims, was restricting on giving students the grade that they deserved. An example would be an HNC Communication and Media, where we have a lot of filmmakers and we've got a lot of radio producers. These aren't the core units in that award, but actually the students excel at that point, and to a certain extent they felt that the guidance they were given in terms of grade units was constraining them to reflect that. So that would be the reason why they would maybe go down that holistic route just for that one unit. I mean, is that acceptable? Do we need to, or can we just decide that, yeah, we've got the aims and objectives and we can add additional information to say, you know, this is how we're making these grades by reflecting this more kind of, I think the phrase I've put in is the colour that perhaps the aims don't have to allow the students to be credited.
Yep, no, good question, Rob. I'm going to ask if Leslie would like to come in on that point.
Thanks, Denise. I know there's been a bit of contention. I think there was a wee bit of discussion earlier, Rob, about allowing centres to focus on optional units where mandatory units are going to be problematic. Is that right in this award, Rob? Where it was specialised, as you're saying?
Well, yeah, it was a combination of specialised. What we do is we would maybe deliver lots of the core units, but it was felt that the students who came onto the courses were more interested in the specialised because they were going to progress into filmmaking or television or radio, and there was just a concern that we weren't being allowed to use those, use that as part of the grading system.
Yeah,
so how well they'd done in that.
Yeah, I think it would be really helpful to have a chat with the qualification manager, Gail English, about this one. I think that she did have a view that we were focused on the mandatory units. But I can't remember where she ended up, because I do know there's a bit of discussion around that. It's a bit more specialised than I think we're able to respond to in this forum, just be for that particular framework.
I think it's also art and design, photography, a lot of the creative units, sound production. I think a lot of the creative end of the spectrum felt that perhaps some of the competencies were tying them down, and that's why they're thinking, let's go into this holistic approach. And that for that unit, so that they can gather that evidence and put that in the documentation. So it seems to be a graded unit focus rather than the whole award, because they both have the units.
I mean, all I can do is take that back to the qualification manager for that particular framework, Rob.
Okay.
Gail sits in the college quality focus.
No, I appreciate that. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
I think we
can't.
need to have a conversation about this because I think there's a
Yeah.
feeling that we're missing something here with good students in qualifications that maybe we've got additional points that nobody's really capturing to reflect their competence.
Okay.
We'll take that back. We'll take that back, Rob.
No, I appreciate that, Rob, and I think we'll have some more internal discussions and see if it's a response at a kind of sectoral level that we need around creative. So thank you for that. I'm conscious of time. I'm also conscious that we haven't answered everything that's in the comments section. So what I would suggest is that we take those questions away and we'll very quickly try and capture those in a sort of FAQ, if you like, and get those back out or publish them along with the recording of this today, which, as I said, is going to be made available online. Not sure where yet, but as soon as we have that agreed, we'll get links sent out via SQA coordinators. So just before we finish, I'd like to say thank you to Matthew, Leslie and Juliet for their time and their informative sessions this afternoon. I also want to thank all of the college colleagues that have contributed to the guidance for this session. Your time and experience really has been invaluable. If you have any further questions that arise out with this session, could you send them on to your SQA coordinator, and if you're your SQA coordinator and you don't have an answer, please come to us through the normal routes and we'll help support you. So thank you all very much for your contributions today, and that brings the webinar to a close. So thank you all very much.